I stood at the door, my hands cold and empty. The same door that once opened to laughter now felt like a wall between me and everything I had loved. I turned the handle slowly, and the sound of it clicking open almost broke something inside me. The smell of home hit me, old wood, dust, and memories. I looked around, and for a second, I saw it all again. My kids running in the hallway, my husband sitting on the couch pretending to read while secretly watching. Those small, warm moments that used to mean everything. But now they were gone. I stepped inside quietly, afraid to disturb the silence. The house didn't welcome me anymore. The pictures were gone from the wall. The curtains were new. Even the color of the furniture had changed. It was my home, but I no longer belonged. And before I tell you more, please subscribe, because no one else wants to hear my pain. No one sits with me to ask how I am. Maybe you will. Maybe you'll listen, so at least I can tell someone what really happened. I walked deeper into the house, my shoes making soft sounds on the wooden floor. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect, like someone had tried to erase every trace of me. My wedding photo wasn't there. The clock I bought from our first trip together, it was gone. And on the shelf, where my son's childhood trophy once stood, there was now a vase. A new one, something that didn't belong to me. I whispered, "They changed everything," and my voice cracked halfway. Then I heard footsteps, slow, calm, confident. My son appeared from the hallway. He looked older, colder. His eyes didn't carry the warmth I remembered. He looked at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered in without permission. "Why are you here, Mom?" he asked, his voice flat. For a moment I couldn't speak. How could I explain that this used to be my home? That the walls still whispered my name even if they didn't want to hear it? I said softly, "I just wanted to see it once, the house. That's all." He crossed his arms and stared at me like I had no right to exist. And maybe in his mind I didn't. His father had done a good job. He had turned my children against me. Every word I had ever said twisted, poisoned, and planted like a lie in their hearts. I wanted to tell him the truth, but looking into his eyes, I knew he wouldn't believe me. I looked around one more time. The room felt cold, and though I was standing right there, I'd never felt more invisible in my life. I picked up my bag again, clutching it tightly, like it was the only thing still mine. And as I looked toward the stairs, I told myself, if I was strong enough to walk out once, maybe I'm strong enough to walk back in and face what's waiting for me. As I stepped further into the house, every sound felt louder, sharper, like it was mocking me. The floors creaked under my weight, and the air smelled faintly of dust and something else, something familiar yet completely foreign. I moved slowly, my eyes scanning every corner, every piece of furniture, remembering how it used to feel alive with laughter and warmth. Then I saw it, a note lying on the dining table, plain but loaded with cruelty. My hands shook as I picked it up. The handwriting was sharp, almost cold. "Mom, stay away. This is our house now." I froze. Those words weren't just words. They were a declaration. My own children, the people I raised, had been taught to fear me, to resent me, to erase me from their lives. And that lesson had been delivered by someone I once trusted completely. I sank into the nearest chair, clutching the note, as if holding on would somehow soften the blow. But it didn't. It only reminded me of years spent trying to keep a family together, of nights crying alone, wondering where I went wrong. I felt the sting of betrayal deep in my chest. I couldn't believe this was my life now. The home I had built with love, the memories carefully tucked into every room, had been turned against me. And the worst part, no one would listen to me. No one would hear the pain, the hurt, the truth. That's why I need you to listen now. That's why I want you to subscribe. No one else is going to hear my story. Not like this. Not the way I lived it. So please subscribe so I can tell you everything, from the first hurt to the moment I realized I had to fight back. I looked around the room again, taking in the silence, the absence of life, the invisible walls built to keep me out. I knew I had to move carefully. Every step I took, I reminded myself, mattered. Every memory, every detail, every hurt would guide. As I stood up, I noticed the photo frames on the mantel. They weren't placed haphazardly. They were carefully arranged to showcase a family that didn't want me in it. Smiles frozen in time, faces that should have loved me, but now they felt like strangers staring back with judgment. I walked over slowly, touched one of the frames. My fingers traced the outline of my child's smiling face, and my heart twisted. How could the same child who once clung to me in the dark now write words like that? How did I go from being the center of their world to a stranger, unwelcome in the home I helped build? I sank back into the chair, realizing that this was not just about being thrown out. It was about being erased, rewritten, as if my existence no longer mattered. And yet, something inside me refused to break. I wasn't done. Not yet. Because even when the people who should have loved me turned away, I had my own strength. I had my own voice, and I was going to use it. I took a deep breath, picked up the note again, and whispered to myself, "They can try to erase me, but I am still here. I am still me. This was only the beginning. The house, the note, the betrayal, they were all part of a story that needed to be told, a story that someone had to hear. And now I was ready to tell it. When I stepped into that house, the air was thick with quiet I wasn't used to. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt peaceful. It was heavy, waiting for something to break. The first thing I noticed was the living room, neat to the point of being intimidating. Every cushion perfectly fluffed, every picture frame aligned like it belonged in a magazine. I hesitated at the threshold, feeling like I was intruding, though I had nowhere else to go. I took a careful step inside, my shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floor. The smell hit me next, fresh wood, faint lavender, and something else that reminded me of safety, something I hadn't felt in years. My eyes wandered around, taking in the furniture, the artwork, the subtle glow of sunlight spilling through the tall windows. It was beautiful, almost too beautiful for someone like me, someone who had spent decades feeling invisible, disregarded, even rejected. I noticed a photograph on the mantelpiece, a younger man with the same intense eyes I remembered from years ago, smiling widely with a child in his arms. My chest tightened. That child looked so much like me, a reminder that life had moved forward without my voice ever really being heard. My throat ached as I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to cry. I heard a soft shuffle from the kitchen and turned. That's when I saw him, not just standing there, but moving with a quiet confidence that made me feel both small and oddly safe at the same time. His eyes met mine immediately, and I knew that look, like he had been waiting for me all along. He didn't rush to speak or smile, he just studied me, and in that silence, I felt the weight of everything unsaid between us. I shifted my weight, uncertain, and he finally spoke, his voice low, steady, familiar. "You made it." I nodded, words failing me, because it was true. I had made it here, against everything, against the years of being pushed aside, dismissed and abandoned. And somehow, just somehow, I had found someone who still saw me, really saw me. For a moment, we just stood there, letting the silence stretch between us. I wanted to explain everything, why I had waited so long, why I had felt so alone, why their rejection had hurt so much, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I took a cautious step forward, and he stepped toward me at the same time. The distance between us closed, and it was like the past and the present collided in that space, shaking loose emotions I had buried for decades. I finally managed to speak, my voice barely a whisper. I don't even know where to start." He offered a small, patient smile. "Start anywhere. I'll listen." And in that moment, I realized something. For the first time in years, I had someone willing to listen, someone willing to let me be heard without judgment. That thought alone made my knees weak. I glanced around the kitchen, the counters spotless, a kettle quietly steaming on the stove. My stomach twisted. I hadn't cooked for anyone in years. I wasn't used to being cared for like this. I wasn't used to having space that wasn't just a room to survive in. I started again, hesitating. I've been left out, ignored. My own children, they've turned against me. And I don't know how to fix it." He didn't interrupt. He just nodded slowly, listening, letting me spill my pain in chunks I didn't even realize I had held back for myself. And as I spoke, something shifted inside me. I wasn't just venting. I was reclaiming a piece of myself I had thought lost forever. When I finally paused, he reached out and took my hand. His touch was warm, grounding, a quiet reminder that I wasn't invisible, that someone still cared. I looked down at our joined hands, and for a fleeting second, I allowed myself to hope. Not blind, foolish hope, but a hope that maybe, just maybe, I could start building a life where I wasn't defined by rejection or disappointment, where I could exist without fear of being pushed aside. I breathed deeply, taking in the house, the sunlight, and the presence of someone who finally saw me. "Thank you," I whispered, almost to myself. "Thank you for letting me in." He squeezed my hand once firmly, without letting go. "You're welcome. This is just the beginning." And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like maybe I could believe in the possibility that life wasn't done with me yet, that even after everything, I could find a place where I belong. As I stepped further into the house, every corner seemed to hold a quiet story of someone who cared, someone who had built a life with intention. The living room opened up into a hallway, and my eyes fell on a small table with framed photos. Family photos, but not the kind I was used to. These weren't perfect. Smiling faces at posed events. They were candid shots, messy, real, people laughing, holding each other, living their lives. I walked closer, my fingers brushing lightly over one of the frames. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6, was running across a backyard, her hair flying in the wind. The moment was pure joy. I felt a pang in my chest, remembering how long it had been since I had felt that kind of lightness, that kind of belonging. My own children had never captured me in moments like that. They were never interested in the small, real parts of life that matter. The kitchen was next, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee made my stomach tighten. I had been so hungry for comfort, for warmth, for even a small gesture that reminded me I was not alone. He was already there, standing by the counter, moving smoothly, effortlessly, as if this house had been waiting for me all along. He looked up and gave me that same gentle smile he had offered when I first walked in. "Sit down," he said simply. "I made us some breakfast." I lowered myself into a chair, still feeling like an outsider, still not sure I fully belonged, but the aroma of food, the presence of someone who seemed to genuinely care about me, eased a tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. He placed a plate in front of me, scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. Simple, ordinary, but somehow it felt like luxury after the days of cold, lonely hotel meals. "I can't tell you how strange this feels," I admitted, my voice shaking slightly. "To be here, to be seen." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying me like he had all the time in the world. "I've been waiting to see you like this," he said softly. "Not just passing through life, not just surviving, really alive. You deserve to be seen." The words hit me hard. No one had ever said that to me. Not my children, not my husband, not anyone. And yet here it was, spoken plainly, truth. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, but I fought them back. I wasn't used to crying for myself. I was used to crying for everything I had lost. I took a deep breath and tried to steady myself. "I've spent so long feeling invisible," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "Feeling like I don't matter to anyone." He shook his head slowly, a look of quiet determination on his face. "You do matter. You always mattered. And now you have a chance to live for yourself, to take back the parts of life you thought were gone forever." I swallowed, a lump forming in my throat. I wanted to believe him, but part of me still feared it was too good to be true. Life had let me down too many times before. But as I looked at him, standing there, patient, steady, unwavering, I realized something. Maybe this time, it wasn't about luck. Maybe it was about choice. He slid into the chair across from me, a plate of eggs in front of him, and for the first time we ate together, not hurriedly, not out of obligation, but just two people sharing a meal, acknowledging each other's existence. I found myself laughing softly at something he said, a joke about burning toast in a past apartment he had lived in. The sound startled me. It had been so long since I had heard my own laughter, unguarded, unforced. After breakfast, he gestured toward the sitting room. "There's more to show you," he said. "Places where you can feel at home, corners that are waiting for." I followed, a tentative hope growing in my chest. Each room held reminders that this wasn't just a house. It was a place built for life, for comfort, for moments like this. And maybe, just maybe, there was a place for me here too. As I moved from room to room, touching the furniture, feeling the textures under my fingertips, I realized that the small details mattered. The way light fell across a windowsill, the way a chair had been angled toward the fireplace, the care taken in placing flowers on a side table. It all spoke of someone who valued life, who valued comfort, who valued home. And now I was part of it. I paused near a window, looking out at the garden beyond. Sunlight danced across the flowers, and for a moment, I allowed myself to breathe fully, without fear, without doubt. Maybe this was the start of something I had never thought possible. Maybe life had more to offer than I had dared to hope. And as I turned to see him watching me, quietly, patiently, I understood one thing clearly. I wasn't alone anymore. I walked slowly across the living room, my fingers grazing the back of the sofa, feeling the smoothness of the fabric. It wasn't just furniture. Each piece told a story of care, of thoughtfulness, of someone who had built this life with intention. I realized I had been craving this kind of attention, not the kind that demands something in return, not the kind that judges or belittles, but the kind that simply notices you, acknowledges. He followed me quietly, not hovering, not pressuring, just present. And that presence felt like safety I hadn't felt in decades. I paused near a small bookshelf, pulling out a book at random. The pages smelled faintly of old paper, comforting, familiar, grounding. I ran my thumb along the spine, thinking about all the years I had spent alone, trying to fill the silence with television, with errands, with work. None of it had felt real. None of it had made me feel seen. "You like it?" he asked softly, breaking my thoughts. I looked up, startled. "Like what?" "The house, the books, the quiet corners you've already discovered." I hesitated. I think it's more than I ever imagined. I never thought I'd be somewhere that feels like this, like I belong. He smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "Then you do belong. You just didn't realize it yet." I wanted to tell him about the years of being pushed aside, the years of feeling invisible, the years of my own children questioning my worth. But the words felt too heavy, too painful. Instead, I nodded, letting the silence carry what I couldn't speak. He led me into the kitchen again, where he had laid out a small basket of fresh fruit. "You've been through so much," he said quietly, "and I know life hasn't always been kind, but that doesn't mean the rest of your story can't be different." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to let myself believe that the mistakes, the heartbreak, the betrayals, none of them had to define me anymore. I wanted to step into this new chapter, slowly, carefully, but fully. I took a piece of fruit, biting into it, tasting sweetness I hadn't allowed myself to enjoy in years. It was strange how simple acts could feel like luxury, how small gestures could rebuild trust in life, in people, in myself. He sat across from me, watching, patient, and I realized I hadn't had someone truly watch me, without judgment, without expectation, for a very long time. Maybe never. And yet here he was, giving me space, giving me permission to just be. After a moment, I said softly, "I don't even know how to do this. How to start living again when I've spent so long surviving." "You start by noticing," he replied simply. "Noticing the small thing, the sunlight, the smells, the texture. Noticing yourself, noticing that you're here, that you matter. Everything else comes later." I let his words sink in, feeling the weight of them lift some of the heaviness from my chest. I had been carrying so much pain, anger, loss, disappointment. But in this house, with him, I realized I could put some of it down. We sat in quiet together, no need to fill the silence with forced conversation. It was comfortable, real, human. I realized that this was the first time in a very long time that I didn't feel like a visitor in someone else's life. This was the first time I felt like I had a place where I could breathe. And as I looked around, as I allowed myself to take in the room, the house, the life he had built, I understood something I hadn't realized before. I wasn't just stepping into his world. I was starting to reclaim my own. After a while, I stood and walked toward the window. The sunlight was streaming in, hitting the polished floors and the neat furniture. I could see the garden outside, the flowers in full bloom, the pathways that looked like they had been designed for slow, thoughtful walks. I realized I hadn't seen this kind of beauty in my life in a very long time. The kind that isn't loud, isn't forced, but just exists quietly, perfectly, waiting for someone to notice it. He came up behind me, and I felt his presence without look. I didn't need to explain anything, didn't need to apologize for the past. He didn't ask for stories of what had gone wrong. He didn't demand reasons for why I had been alone for so long. He simply stood there, patient, letting me take it all in. "I never thought I'd see you like this," he said finally, softly, almost in a whisper. "Not because you're different, but because I never wanted anyone else to see you. Not really. I was too scared, too stubborn, too foolish." I turned to look at him. "See me like what? Like this, alive, present, not hiding behind obligations, behind fear, behind everything that's been stolen from you. You're here, fully here, for the first time in so many years." I swallowed hard, feeling a lump in my throat. The truth of his words hit me harder than anything else could. He was right. I had spent decades retreating, hiding, surviving. I hadn't allowed myself to live. And now, standing in this room, feeling the warmth of sunlight and the quiet strength of someone who cared, I realized maybe it was finally time to start. I sat back down at the kitchen table, tracing the edge of the counter with my fingers. "I don't even know where to begin," I admitted. "Everything feels new, fragile, but possible." "You begin by trusting yourself," he said. "By trusting that you deserve more than you've been given, that you can build again, even if it looks different from what you imagined before. That life can still surprise you." I wanted to laugh, but it came out shaky and uncertain. "Surprise me, huh? After everything? Life hasn't exactly been kind to me." "Maybe not," he said, "but it doesn't have to be cruel anymore. Not to you. You've earned this, even if you didn't know you deserved it." I looked around again, noticing the small details, the way the sunlight caught the crystal vase, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the quiet tick of a clock on the wall. These things were ordinary, but they felt extraordinary to me because I was noticing, because for the first time in years, I felt like I was allowed to notice. "I don't know how to do this without being scared," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "You don't have to do it alone," he replied. "I'll be here, step by step, not pushing, just walking beside you. You won't have to face this alone anymore." And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't felt in decades. Relief. Not just relief, but a flicker of hope. A belief that maybe, just maybe, the rest of my life could be different. That maybe I didn't have to survive anymore. I could start living. I took a deep breath, letting it fill me with something I had almost forgotten: possibility. The kind that doesn't come with guarantees, but comes with someone willing to walk beside you, silently, patiently, fully. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that maybe I could be happy, not for a moment, not in a fleeting way, but fully, completely, without shame or apology. I stayed at the table for a long time, just staring at the sunlight on the counter. My hands were still trembling a little, but the shaking felt different now. It wasn't fear, It was anticipation, like my body was waking up after years of being frozen. I could hear him moving around the kitchen quietly, making himself a cup of coffee, and it was strange to feel so calm while knowing how much had changed in my life in just a few hours. He walked over and set the cup down in front of me. "Here," he said, "for when you're ready." I looked at it, the steam curling up slowly, and I realized I hadn't had a morning like this in decades. A morning where I wasn't rushing to survive, where no one was yelling, blaming, or demanding. A morning where I could just exist, and someone cared if I did. "I don't even know what to say," I whispered finally. "Everything is so real. Too real. I'm scared it's all going to fall apart." He knelt down slightly, so he was eye level with me. "Then don't think about falling apart. Just think about being here now. One step at a time. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to prove anything. Just be you." I nodded, feeling a tear slip down my cheek. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was relief, mixed with disbelief. After everything, after the years of being treated like a burden, after the fire, after being pushed aside by my own children, I was finally being allowed to just exist. And someone was celebrating it, instead of judging it. "You deserve this," he said quietly. "Every bit of it, and I'm not going anywhere." I let myself believe him, not just the words, but the promise behind them. I let myself breathe without guilt, without worry, without feeling like I owed anyone an explanation. For the first time in decades, I could just be. We sat in silence for a few moments, the kind of silence that feels alive, comforting, not empty. I could hear the birds outside, the gentle hum of life moving forward, and I realized something I hadn't before. Life wasn't over. Not really. It was just beginning in a way I hadn't thought was possible anymore. "I can't believe this is happening," I said finally, almost to myself. "After everything, this feels like a miracle." He reached out and took my hand. "It's not a miracle. It's you. You're here. You survived. You're finally allowed to have." And for the first time in years, I let myself smile. Not a forced smile, not a cautious one, but a real, unguarded smile. Because maybe, finally, after all the years of being invisible, after all the pain and the rejection, I had a place where I belonged. And someone who saw me, truly saw me, and wouldn't let go. I knew then, with certainty, that I could face anything now. Because I wasn't alone anymore. Not in the house, not in life, not in the world. I left the table finally, feeling the weight in my chest lift just a little. The kitchen felt different now, warm, lived-in, safe. I walked slowly toward the living room, my steps careful, almost like I didn't want to disturb the new reality that was slowly unfolding around me. The sunlight spilling through the windows highlighted the details I had missed in my life for so long. The way the rugs were soft underfoot, the books stacked neatly on the shelves, the photographs of someone's happiness carefully placed across the room. He followed me, not hovering, not pressuring, just quietly moving beside me. "Take a look around," he said. "It's your space too." I touched the arm of the sofa gently, running my fingers over the fabric, and I realized how much I had craved a home. Not just a roof over my head, but a place where I could belong, where my presence mattered, where no one judged me for being myself. And now here I was. I paused by the window, looking out at the garden that stretched beyond. The flowers were beginning to bloom, and the gentle hum of life outside made something inside me stir. Hope, real hope, not the kind you cling to because you have no choice, but the kind that settles quietly in your chest, telling you that maybe, just maybe, life can be beautiful. He came up behind me, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. "You don't have to do anything right now," he said. "Just be here. Let yourself feel this. Let yourself start again." I nodded, my throat tight. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted. "You start wherever you want," he said. "You've spent decades living for everyone else. Now it's your turn." I let out a shaky breath and turned to look at him, really look, taking in the kindness in his eyes, the patience in his smile. He wasn't here to fix me or change me. He was here to walk beside me while I found myself again. And for the first time, I realized that maybe I didn't need to have all the answers. Maybe it was enough just to be alive, to be seen, to be acknowledged. I walked further into the living room, my eyes falling on a chair by the window. I sat down slowly, feeling the soft cushion embrace me. He sat across from me, quietly, giving me space but making it clear he was there. And in that silence, I started to understand something I had forgotten long ago, that safety, peace, and love weren't things I had to earn. They were things I deserved. And finally, I was allowed to have. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a visitor in my own life. I was home. I stayed in that chair for a long time, just staring at the sunlight spilling across the floor, letting it warm my hand. The house smelled faintly of lavender and fresh bread, small touches that made it feel lived in, cared for. I realized I had been so used to surviving that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to live. Not just exist, not just get through the day, but really live. He moved around the room quietly, arranging things, making the space feel natural, as if he had known I would be. There was no rush, no expectation, just a rhythm that felt comforting, steady. I wanted to say something, to express the storm of emotions churning inside me, but the words didn't come yet. They would, I knew, eventually. Finally, I stood and walked toward the window. Outside, the garden was in full bloom, and birds were fluttering from branch to branch. I took a deep breath and let myself feel it, the calm, the safety, the possibility of happiness. I hadn't felt like this in decades. Every worry, every insult, every moment of rejection seemed to melt away in that light. He came up behind me again, resting a hand lightly on my back. "You don't have to decide anything today," he said softly. "Just let it be. Let yourself breathe." I nodded, closing my eyes for a moment. I could feel the tension in my shoulders slowly release. The weight I had been carrying, the years of hurt, of feeling unwanted, unloved, was still there, but it felt smaller somehow. Lighter. I realized then that maybe healing didn't come all at once. Maybe it came in small steps, in moments like this, where someone simply gave you space to be yourself. I opened my eyes and turned to him. "Thank you," I whispered. "For this, for everything." He smiled, that same quiet, knowing smile, and shook his head. "No thanks needed," he said. "You've earned this, every bit of it. You just didn't know it yet." For the first time, I believed him. And for the first time, I felt like maybe the rest of my life didn't have to be about surviving. Maybe it could be about living, truly living, and being seen for who I was, not for what others expected me to be, not for what I had lost, but for who I had become. I walked back toward the living room and sat down again, letting the sunlight wash over me. I didn't know what the future would hold. There were still challenges, still memories that hurt, still people who didn't understand me. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them, because I wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. When I opened the door to that part of the house I had not dared enter before, my hands trembled slightly. I was nervous, not because I was afraid of anything in particular, but because I didn't know what I would find. Every corner of this house had become a reflection of a life I had almost given up on, a life I had been told I didn't deserve. The walls seemed familiar yet foreign, as though they held pieces of the past I had buried and parts of a future I had never imagined. As I stepped in, I noticed the faint smell of lavender mixed with the lingering aroma of coffee from the kitchen. The sunlight poured in through the large windows, scattering patterns across the floorboards. My eyes adjusted slowly, taking in the furniture, the photographs on the walls, the books neatly lined on the shelves. I noticed a small, framed picture of Randall and his sister as children, smiling innocently. It made me realize that behind every smile there was a story just like mine. I moved further in, taking careful steps as if I were entering a sacred space. On the table lay a letter, slightly crumpled at the edges, but neat enough that someone had clearly cared about it. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand. The handwriting was precise, almost elegant, and I could sense the person behind it, someone who had been careful with words, someone who had thought deeply about every line. It reminded me of the letters I had written to myself during the darkest years of my life, letters that I had never sent, letters that only served as silent witnesses to my struggle. I sat down on the nearest chair and began to read. The words resonated with me in a way that was almost painful, because they spoke of patience, endurance, and quiet strength. I realized that for years I had been running from my own life, thinking I needed approval from those who had long stopped caring. But this letter reminded me that survival was not about escaping. It was about embracing the truth, facing the pain, and allowing yourself to feel everything without judgment. Randall entered quietly, and I looked up at him. He didn't say anything at first, just waited, giving me the space to process my thoughts. I knew he understood without needing to explain. That was what made this house feel like a home. Not just the walls, not just the furniture, but the presence of someone who saw me, really saw me, without expectation, without judgment. I put down the letter and looked around the room more carefully. There were small details I had overlooked before. A vase with fresh flowers, neatly stacked magazines, a candle that had just burned down halfway. Each item felt intentional, deliberate, and it struck me that life could be beautiful in small, quiet ways. I had spent so long chasing grand gestures and seeking validation from those who would never give it, that I had almost forgotten the power of small, steady acts of. I walked over to the window and looked outside. The garden stretched far and wide, filled with blooming flowers, lush greenery, and a small fountain that trickled water soft. The sound was calming, almost meditative, and I felt my heartbeat slow as I breathed in the cool air. I realized that this house, this place, was not just a physical space. It was a sanctuary for healing, a place where I could finally allow myself to process the years of pain, betrayal, and loss. Randall joined me at the window, leaning lightly against the frame. He didn't speak immediately, only watched as I took in the scenery. After a moment, he said softly, "You've been through more than most can imagine, and yet here you are, standing, breathing, choosing to see something good, even now." I turned to him, my throat tight. "It's hard," I admitted. "Hard to let go of the anger, the hurt. Hard to believe that I deserve peace after everything I've been through." He nodded slowly. "I know, but peace isn't something you earn. It's something you allow yourself to have, and you've earned the right to allow it." I stayed quiet, letting his words sink in. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to accept them, not just as polite encouragement, but as truth. I had lived through the worst, survived betrayals, endured loneliness, and yet here I was, standing on the threshold of a life I could finally call my own. I moved away from the window and walked down the hallway, noticing the subtle sounds of the house, the creak of the floorboards, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock. Every sound was comforting, a reminder that life continued even after devastation. I entered the living room, where the couch looked inviting, the cushions plump and soft. I sank into it, closing my eyes for a moment, and allowed myself to simply be. Memories of the past surfaced involuntarily. The nights my children had rejected me, the harsh words my husband had used, the isolation I had felt when the world seemed to turn against me. I had thought these wounds would define me forever, but now I saw them different. They were part of my story, yes, but they were not the entirety of it. There was more to life than pain. There was hope, and there was healing, and there was a chance for me to finally reclaim the joy I had been denied for so long. I opened my eyes and saw Randall standing near the doorway, watching me. "You've come a long way," he said, almost as an observation rather than a comment. "And this is just the beginning. The rest of your life is waiting, but you have to step into it fully." I nodded. "I want to. I really do. But it's scary." He smiled gently. "It's supposed to be. That's what makes it worth it. Life doesn't ask us to take the easy path. It asks us to take the path that matters, the one that teaches us, the one that shows us who we truly are." I spent hours that day exploring the house, touching items, examining photographs, reading notes, and absorbing the care that had gone into every detail. Each object told a story of thoughtfulness and intention, and it reminded me that life could be beautiful if I allowed myself to see. I could rebuild, I could heal, and I could finally be seen for who I truly was. By evening, I found myself in the kitchen again, helping Randall prepare dinner. There was laughter, small teasing, the kind of easy interaction I hadn't experienced in decades. I realized that joy wasn't about grandeur, it was about connection, about being present, about sharing life with someone who respected and valued. As night fell and the house quieted once more, I sat by the fireplace, reflecting on everything. The road to this point had been long and torturous, filled with betrayal, disappointment, and loneliness. But now, as I sat in the warm glow of the fire, I understood that my story was far from over. There was still life to live, still love to experience, still moments to cherish. Before I end, I want to speak directly to you. My story is not unique in its pain, but it is unique in its survival and in the ability to continue. No one else would have listened. No one else would have understood the depth of it. But you are here. You are listening. And because of that, I can finally tell my story fully, honestly, without holding back. So please subscribe. Subscribe so I can continue to share so I can finally speak to someone who will hear me completely, who will understand the journey of pain, survival, and hope. You may be the only one willing to listen, and that is enough. Your presence allows me to tell my story, and it allows us both to find meaning in it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for allowing me to finally reclaim my voice, piece by piece, and for giving me the chance to share a life rebuilt from fragments of pain into something real, something hopeful, something worth living.